AP Revision Challenge. So I'm going to ask that you revise an SI work that you have already created. So we're going backwards. Okay? You're going to choose a work that you feel is drawn to change, to revision, and enhancements. Maybe it's something that we already critiqued and talked about, how it needed a little something more, or needed a nudge in the right direction. In your sketchbook, I want you to reread your sustained investigation statement. Be honest. How well does this design, creation, drawing fit the inquiry that you currently have? Be honest. Maybe it's sort of touching on it, but maybe not enough. Where could you beef it up? Formulate some questions. So in your sketchbook, I want you to write down questions that you have about what you've done thus far and what you feel could be done still. Things like, what about the original fits my inquiry? Write a few sentences on that. What could I add or be added to enhance and push the idea visually further? And list some. What media could help emotionally and show a feeling or a mood that goes more towards my inquiry? How could I incorporate a mood into an image? Dissect your SI further. Break it down more in detail. Again, we've kind of done some of this mapping idea where if you're on a path, could you branch out into some smaller twigs? They're both right now a bit sterile for you two. I think you need to both consider putting a little bit more, and I hate to say this, passion. Not that you're not invested or involved, but it needs to have a feeling of real interest in your topic. And I'm not quite getting the desired interest that's coming from within. I'll talk about that just a little bit more later. So then we're in the revise. Revise your inquiry now. What? You told me to get a statement. I got a statement. I did that at the beginning of like October. Now I have to change it? Yes. As we kind of keep reevaluating what we have and looking toward revisions, we should also not only revise how we're saying what we're interested in looking up, but it's going to support how we might change visually, okay? So the inquiry has to keep up with our changes and our developments, okay? And remember, development and revision go hand in hand. Document, document, document. I'm not sure how much you guys are keeping up on documentation. I haven't made you all like submit photos of documented things, of you working, etc. But in your sketchbook, give some written commentary about what development and ideas and actions you've taken as you start to change things and alter things or create. It would be nice that as you start moving forward from here on out with any of the work that we revise, that when you document, you'll start with statements such as, initially I, beneath the statement. As my investigation continued, and I decided, all of those statement starters kind of give us the feeling that you've been somewhere and now you've moved somewhere else. So those are kind of some statements that I want you to write in your sketchbook as you're exploring changes and ideas, they're going to help us then use those same statements in your finished SI commentary that we're allowed to write, supporting what you've done, how you've revised, how you've developed, and how you've grown. And those kind of sentence starters are going to help us out. Take a before picture. So once you've chosen which work of art you've already finished that you want to take and push further to really advance this notion and this inquiry and stretch the idea even further, take a before picture, preferably in the studio or next to a window with really nice lighting, so that you get the best light and it's a nice clean photo, because you're about to change it. So we need a good photo so that we have at least one slide of how it used to be, and then we'll show the progression or the change of it later on. Take photos of the various stages of your work. If you haven't been doing that or haven't taken any images at all of you working, you need to take some pictures. And what I mean is, show the big jumps, show big leaps. You know, concept drawing 1, okay. Halfway through the image or working with some medium in detail, have somebody take a picture of you working on it, on that detail, close up. And then, you know, if you created or finished another section or tried something new in another area, then take that picture. You know, don't take a scheduled picture every 10 to 15 minutes. That's just boring, okay? But show the big changes in your development. Show you working on the project. So have close-ups occasionally. We may or may not have the need to show some of those, depending on what we're trying to illustrate or point we're trying to get across. But not having them isn't an option. But having them, we have that option to show if we need to. Whether you have someone take them for you, or whether you set up your phone or your iPad and a timer to shoot for you. So now we want to begin to do the following. We saw this in the last slide presentation I gave you guys about revision in general, which led us to our Molly Springfield kind of exploration. We need to begin now to adjust, adapt, add to, subtract, cut, build on, repeat, combine, transfer, animate something, make it digital, change the scale, isolate, distort, replace things, emphasize things, vary your techniques and medias, etc., etc., etc. All right. You probably haven't seen this since way back over the summer when I was talking about what SIs are and stuff. But I'm going to show you my sample of the work that they had us do over the summer as we were learning how to kind of explain and develop this SI concept of inquiry, how to illustrate, how to revise. So I chose something that I have an interest and a passion in, which is kind of one of the ways that you can start to build that passion and interest into what your SI is get excited over it. And if you have to stretch it somewhere else to get to that excitement, then do it. All right. My interest is in mid-century living and lifestyle and art and textiles and furniture. So I've been designing in this style of my home for years. So I wanted to know more about it. I know a lot, but I wanted to delve more into it in an artistic way. So my inquiry over the summer that I took on for this example was, how was the style of art, textiles, furniture, and architecture during the mid-century time frame a result of what was happening in the world at that time? Some other springboard questions I kind of pulled or little branches off of that, how did societal influences like politics and global warfare, did they affect visual trends in art, in textile, in everyday furniture and modern living? How was the middle class's lifestyle affected by designers' influences in the global scene? The whole idea of the middle class fit into the world of mid-century art and furniture and textiles, primarily because they were creating and wanting to have these new modular kind of materials and things that were more accessible and more in the price point for middle class people to own and to have. The irony is they became more popular with the avant-garde, and all of a sudden prices started to go up, and more people in an affluent price point were purchasing them, and they weren't necessarily overly available to everybody in the middle class market. So my initial sketchbook experimentation was to kind of marry some things together between the furniture and the patterns I was interested in of that era and how they might set feelings and moods. There were a lot of sleek, streamlined pieces of furniture, and this particular chase is a close-up of this chase. It's a Wormley chase is the artist, and a chase is normally something that's long that you lay your legs on, and then the seating at the top kind of holds your upper shoulders and back area. So this is the back area, and it would be going this direction, but I have it then coming back in this way. Design-wise, I kind of broke it up as if I've chopped it in pieces, but it's a very straight lines, angular and then straight. Nothing like squishy or soft or anything like that. So I was also showing this hard, soft, straight line against very geometric, rounded things in the background. So I was contrasting the circular stuff with the very linear stuff, and showing some contrast between the very bland furniture, kind of a setup here, with the very powy pop kind of a punchy kind of a pattern that was from designer Werner at that time. So things were very much in the blues and grays, but then there's this very black and white loud pattern. Okay. When I finished it, it looked like this. I did it in watercolor. And I mean, the whole thing is watercolor. So I pulled out all the blue grays and the wood tones, and then had the very abstract background. And it's fine. It kind of has the coldness of the Wormley feel to his steel blue furniture, and the crazy, round contrast to the back, and kind of fits with that whole Cold War era or time frame that we were living in around 1964 or so. But it just felt blah, because everything was kind of cool and cold, and I didn't really feel like it brought in much in the way of politics, really, of how things were going on at that time frame, what was happening that could have been affecting all of this, which was part of my question, right? So I went back to the drawing board. I took a quick scan on the computer of my finished quote-unquote image, slapped it in the middle of a new sketchbook page, and then began to explode beyond that. How can I then take this and do more? So to me, doing more was maybe layering, was maybe going beyond the border onto another larger canvas, quote-unquote, surface. And so I decided to explore, okay, who's president around this time frame? Well, we have Nixon. Well, Nixon's presidency kind of went from something average to, by the end of it, very controversial, obviously, before he was, on the verge of being impeached with the Watergate scandal. So it became very colorful at the end. So I thought, this dull interior area that was sort of that steel cold kind of traditional furniture look, very streamlined, was probably made, let's say it's the beginning of his presidency, the normal route. But then I would start to incorporate splashes of color as as his presidency became full of controversy, color, and question. And then how did the art world or other social influences kind of come into play? Well, I started to think, well, what could I add to this texturally? And I thought small albums or records. So I found at a Salvation Army some old 45 records. And so I cut some of them in half with a saw, and started to look at how am I going to collage some of these in there. And I chose some of them specifically for what the songs were around the same time frame. And one of them was an Elvis image, an Elvis song, sorry. And so I found some magazines from the 1960s, also in Salvation Army and like Goodwill, and went through and found images of different pictures of Nixon. And ironically, I found a picture of Nixon with Elvis Presley, and I have an Elvis record that was going in there. And so that's all of that same time of, the media, the politics, and how all of that kind of wrapped together. And I'm kind of exploring it all through one picture in a lot of mixed media. I had to play with things. I was trying to figure out how am I going to incorporate these photos. And so I went online, and I know there's ways that you can kind of do photo transfers with gel medium and acrylics. So this one was fairly successful in transferring over onto the heavier watercolor paper I had. I thought, I wonder if it would work if I just transfer the photo right onto the actual record. That would be kind of cool. And you can see here that was an epic fail. But again, this is one of those things where I could shrink that and put that onto my slide with some other sketchbook explorations so that they see that there was experimentation, both good and bad, that worked. I even pushed it further to try and what would happen if I enhanced it with some watercolor, and that didn't work either. So here's the final outcome. What did I add? The expansion beyond the watercolor became the continuing of the Werner style, repetitious pattern of those circles and the squares, but it flipped to color to show sort of the later or the latter part of Nixon's presidency. The transfer method worked, and I popped in a little bit of a transparent acrylic to pop color into his face, into the black and white transferred photos of him and of Elvis. He and Elvis are layered over the top of Elvis's album. Again, I found labels of that era who had the oranges in them, which kind of worked with my coloring since I was playing with the idea of popping the oranges out. I knew I wanted to put some color, so I decided I wanted to play with the oranges since a lot of oranges and yellow oranges were happening in the record albums. So even the middle image of Richard Nixon is raised. I put some foam core behind it, and when I hot glued and assembled it all, he's slightly raised, so it gives a little bit more of a dimension to it when you see it in person, and adds some of that layering possibility to it. So a lot of things were done. It went from just a simple plain block kind of watercolor that started to show some of my inquiry. It started to, but it didn't really pull everything in from my inquiry that I was hoping to see, and it kind of pushed it a little bit further. So that's where I need you to go. I need you to, where can I push my inquiry in down a little twig, down another street? How can I maybe rewrite it if I need to get me there, to show development, revision, and that just because we were quote unquote maybe done because Miss Martin gave me a deadline that I had to be quote unquote done for, but looking at it and kind of really examining, is it really in a done state for what I'm curious about? And what can I do more to?